Max patted his shoulder. All will be revealed the day you officially come on board, my boy. That's the tradition. Oof, I just read 1/3 of The Candy Makers. I know Mrs. Gates is reading it again, too.
As he spoke the last few words, the door swung open, surprising them all. And there he stood, Logan, the candy maker's son. Wow. I've missed you guys so much that I started reading the Candy Makers again. And I'm about 2/8 of the way through the book. I know that Mrs. Roy is also reading it. I'm wondering who read more.
Earlier, we compared fractions using number lines. Now let's try a different strategy, this time using equivalent fractions. Pause the video and think about how we could use what we've learned about equivalent fractions to help us compare these fractions. Okay, so we're trying to compare 1/3 and 2/8 to see which is more. Looking at these fractions alone, it's hard to tell. Why? Right, because thirds and eighths aren't the same size. It's like comparing apples and oranges. It would be easier to compare these fractions if the pieces were the same size. To put that another way, it would be easier to compare these fractions if they both had the same or a common denominator. Then we could just look at the numerators to see which one was more. Luckily, we can use what we know about equivalent fractions to find common denominators and help us figure out who read more. Pause the video and think about how we might be able to use equivalent fractions to help us. Let's set up our fractions so we can compare them. Okay, now, if we can find an equivalent fraction for 1/3 and an equivalent fraction for 2/8 that both have a common denominator, we can compare. The easiest way to find a common denominator is to look for a number that is a multiple of both numbers. To do that, I will make a list of multiples of each number until I find one they have in common. I'll start with the first 5 or 6 multiples of each number. So let's start with 3. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Now let's find some for 8. 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. Nothing yet. Let's find a couple more multiples of 3. 21, 24. Hey! 24 is a common multiple of both 3 and 8. That means I can use 24 as a common denominator. Once I plug 24 into my model, all I have to do is use what I know about finding equivalent fractions to help me complete it. To get from 3 to 24, I need to multiply by 8. Whatever I do to the bottom, I need to do to the top. So 1 times 8 is 8. 8 24ths is equal to 1/3. Now I can look at my other fraction. To get from 8 to 24, I just multiply by 3. And whatever I do to the bottom, I need to do to the top. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 24ths is equivalent to 2/8. Now that I've got these equivalent fractions with a common denominator, it's easy to compare. 8 24ths is greater than 6 24ths. So now we know that Mrs. Roy read more. Now it's your turn to compare fractions using common denominators. Come back and watch this video again if you need help.